So how are you doing today, and how have you been managing during this whole COVID time? It's been very surreal.
Yeah, surreal is a good word for it. Today I'm doing really well. Actually, the last few months, I feel like I've gotten into a groove and a rhythm, which is really because when, COVID first happened and the pandemic started, I really struggled to find a routine, and I thought it would last a lot shorter than it actually has been around. So I didn't put things in place that would feel like normal things to me. So now that I've gotten, like, I have a routine bedtime and I kind of know what my schedule looks like, I'm definitely doing better. I try to get outside when it's not, oppressingly hot like it's been lately, but I try to get outside for short walks, and that's really nice. I find myself cooking more just because I have more time in the day. So that's really nice. So yeah, I can say now I'm definitely handling it a lot better than when it started. I think I hit a wall in April or maybe May, and then I had to sort of shake myself out of it and say, okay, this is, I hate to use the term the new normal, but this is what it is. And so what are you going to do about it? And how are you going to find joy, in moments to moments, even though there's a lot you can't do, right? Can you reframe it into, wow, this is an opportunity for you to do some things you've been wanting to do? So that's really been helpful.
Mhm.
But how about you? How are things going for you, and how are you handling all this?
Yeah, I've been doing pretty well, actually, all things considered in this. I think it's been really helpful to have family nearby, and I think after when the initial kind of quarantining started, I wanted to make sure I wasn't visiting people just to be sure there was nothing happening. I think I got especially more concerned about the idea that you could be a carrier and not know it, be asymptomatic. And so I was just wanting there to be time. But as time went on and it seemed like I had been physically distant from people, and there wasn't a lot of then being able to get together with family a bit more. And that was really helpful because I'm an introvert and I can be good spending a lot of time alone, but also realizing in this time, especially when you're forced more to do some of that, just how important it can be to be able to touch someone else and be able to hug and to be closer in that way. So I think that really helped me out quite a lot. And as students are going to learn, CAPS is going to be offering its services virtually in the fall, and we've been offering services virtually since March when everything really ramped up with COVID-19. So we've been sort of offering our full services since then, through including through the summer. So we're going to continue within within that model of service. And what that also provided the opportunity for was it meant that I could work from different locations. And so
Mm.
I was able to still work from, sort of visit my parents, work from their house, and still be surrounded though by family for the times when I wasn't working. And so that was a real wonderful kind of experience to get to have, and a flexibility that's not usually there. So I think as you and I have talked, and we talked on the previous podcast, about those unexpected things in COVID, the unexpected, maybe positive sides when there's a lot of things we can miss, but there's another side of some things we may have gained, or some new perspectives or ways this has slowed us down to get more in touch with certain things that maybe we haven't been when the world was spinning in its usual way. So I think that's one opportunity that I got, was the ability to work from other locations, and what that opened up. So that was really great. And then, as you also know, I've been messing around a lot with some of my photos from travel. I take way too many pictures when I travel, but I've been putting those into movie format and adding music and different effects to that. And that was a lot of fun, just to not only reminisce on those trips, but also to get to indulge that creative side of how can I do this, and how can I put this together, and what can I pick as a theme that might
Mhm.
go with this place that I went to, or what the viewer would be seeing. And so that was a lot of fun, and I think has been one of the biggest things through this period of time. Was we had trainees at our center, as we usually do, who were very creative and coming up with a lot of creative things. And so it was great to interface with them and just feel a creative energy. And so again, in COVID, while it's been hard in a number of ways, there's also ways it's unlocked some creativity or thinking in other ways and more flexibility in certain ways, because that's what's had to happen for to
Mhm.
adapt in a lot of ways. So yeah, that's some of how I've been doing, and it would be nice if this ended tomorrow, but
Listen, I think there will be so many echoes. I think that would resonate with so many people, Anthony, because I think that one thing, it was for me, I think COVID was unexpected. I was hearing about it, I was seeing in the news. I didn't have a sense of how it would impact me day to day. And then, like I said before, I really thought it would be short lived. I thought surely by summer, we'll have control of this thing and life will be back to normal. So I certainly think our listeners could resonate with the idea that, like, hey, you could be gone tomorrow and we would be totally fine with that. Something you said, though, made me think about a question. You mentioned being an introvert, and I'm curious what your thoughts are. I'll share mine first, but I'm curious if you think that introverts or extroverts have it. I don't want to say worse, because there's no really comparison to struggle, but who do you think in this time is really struggling? The people who are used to sort of being out and doing things, or are used to getting their energy from being by themselves, but don't really have the outlet to even have that choice. I would say, in my sort of small circle and data points, I think everyone is struggling equally. I think my friends who are introverted are surprised more at how hard this has been. And I count myself as an introvert. I think I can be extroverted at times, but I really do get a lot of energy from just recharging at home and kind of being in my own space. And I don't like that if I want to be out, if I wanted to go do social stuff, that there's not a lot of options. So yeah, I'm just curious from your standpoint. You mentioned being an introvert. Do you think you have it harder than people who are used to being around folks and getting their energy that way?
yeah, it's interesting the perspective you just shared, because I would have said extroverts have it more harder. Um, because I would have said still, and some of that is, I don't like, I'm thinking of my mom, who I think when I've talked to her still maybe would consider herself an introvert. To be honest, I'm not sure what she's getting at, because she's in some ways classically Southern. Some of her greatest moment could be to sit with you in a car park or in the car porch and just sort of sit on a bench and just talk for hours. And she really loved to do that with her dad, my grandfather, and she's still
Aw.
like that. She would just like to be talking to people, and can talk and go on for hours with that. And she's adjusted okay during this, but it's also been hard for her. She's a Girl Scout leader, draws a lot of energy from that, and then church is really important to her. And it's been hard to get disconnected from those things and be in the house as much as she's having to be. It's been helpful a little bit, because she's been able to do a little more with her Girl Scouts in recent times, of getting together with them over Zoom and having meetings and doing things that way, that still keeps her energized and feeling connected to them. And she even was able to organize a really cool event at their house, to my parents' house, where they invited the troupe there, and they set up an outdoor movie screen and did a drive-in theater. So the girls actually made their cars out of cardboard or whatever and brought those. And then she set up spaces so that people would be 6 feet apart or so. And so it was a way to get together, but still be distant and have masks, but to find a way to prepare sort of snacks
Oh,
in a
wow.
way. And so they got to have a drive-in theater experience. And that was really cool. And she really drew a lot of energy from that. And some parents came, and even people from my parents' neighborhood came. And it was this really sort of wonderful event while still able to be safe. And so she just got a lot of energy from that. And then I was there for that. And it was fun to get to see. And we got to watch Zootopia, which is a pretty amazing movie that touches on things about oppression and difference and compassion. And those are big values for both of us, you and me. So yeah, that was a pretty great event, and I could see how much energy she drew from that. So I think that's helped her, but there's been a little more struggle, I would say, for her, as opposed to, I would say, my dad, myself, and my sister, much more introverted. And so I think we've been a little less stir crazy than she has. But still, it has moments of hitting me, because one of the things I love what I do, I love coming to office and seeing you or other colleagues, interacting with the students, but also what we do is very intense. It's a lot of intense, often individual meeting, group meetings, whatever, but it's often very intense interacting. And that leaves me very tired often at the end of the day, in a good way, but still tired, because of my personality, and social interaction really takes my energy. And so in that way, there's a part of me that I think is dealing okay with this, but I do miss the office and some of that day-to-day sort of thing. And then also, I think for myself, I know some of my psychology is growing up in New York. One of the beautiful things of growing up in New York, where I did, and my family, was that, from a really early age, to walk by myself around the corner to my friend's house, or to walk to school, or to do these other things. So I was used to being by myself. And so independence and sort of a freedom is something I've been accustomed to, and is a big value for me, of sort of freedom of movement. And that's one of the difficult things, is just when choices are restricted, that can also be harder. Of maybe I don't want to go out, but I don't love the idea that I almost can't, and so then almost I start to react of, oh crap, now I really want to go. And also, it just makes the summers felt very weird. It's felt really quick, too fast. And in a lot of ways, it's also been strange, because this would be a wonderful time to be at outdoor concerts, and to go to the American Dance Festival happens in the area every year in Durham. And usually I go to several shows in that and have a really good time. And how much I frequently go to DPAC or to Carolina Theater or to other arts kinds of things in the area. And usually there would be a ton of that in the summer: food festivals, food truck rallies, things that haven't been happening to sort of mark summer. So there's also a strange thing happening with time, where the usual markers of it's summer and this has happened haven't been happening. And you and I talked before about travel and how that can often mark this period of time, and hasn't been something to be engaged in right now. So in that way, it's been a little bit tougher. But yeah, with your original question, I would have said, or I would kind of say, maybe it's the extroverts still, who are struggling a bit more. But like you said, also people can be surprised, and there's still a difference of, again, maybe still, even if you're more introverted, what does it mean when maybe you have some more of that social outlet cut off? And then maybe you notice that even more. Yeah.
Absolutely. So yeah, if you are listening, definitely let us know. Do you think the introverts or people who are extroverted are struggling more? And again, it's not a competition. We're just curious who's feeling this. I do totally agree with the things that you're saying. And when you told me about your mom, that sounds so sweet, to be able to, creatively find ways to be together. And I think that's what's been really impressive, is all the creativity that's come out of this pandemic, globally. I mean, seeing things on social media, seeing things in the news of how people are creatively still together, I think is just really cool. And I hope that we keep that even once this is gone, right? That we still value being creative and slowing down and thinking outside the box, because certainly thinking about a drive-in and making your own car, that's just really creative to come up with that, and to go around the barrier of we can't be together. So I really, really like that, that idea. So yeah, let us know if you're listening, what you think. And yeah, we're gonna take a little informal poll here to see. Um, Anthony, one thing you mentioned, and we're gonna talk a lot about travel. So if travel is not your thing, then you probably don't want to keep subscribing. We promise not to talk as much today about it, but I am really curious about linking in the thing that you said earlier. You know, you grew up in New York, you independent, able to get around. Can you talk to us a little bit, because I don't have as much experience as you do with solo traveling, and what are some things that maybe you learned about yourself, or that you've learned, even tips or things that you want people to consider if that people, a lot of times people won't travel if they don't have someone to travel with. And I think that you're going to miss out on a lot of life experiences if you are waiting for someone else to go with you or a group of people. So can you talk a little bit about solo traveling and maybe lessons that you've learned, either about yourself or fears that you conquered when you were doing your solo travels?
Yeah. So I'm trying to think about the timeline and the history. I think I probably did a few things in the United States, and that probably didn't feel as big a deal to do that solo, because I'm familiar with the culture and that sort of thing. But to go abroad, the first time I think I really traveled abroad by myself. Well, I went to Vancouver by myself from Oregon. I spent time with a cousin in Oregon, and then I went to Vancouver by myself. But Canada, I don't experience as having much culture shock of going to Canada.
Okay.
It feels similar to being in the United States, and English is spoken widely most places, especially in Vancouver. So that didn't feel that different. I think the first time really where there was more nervousness for me was the time that I went to, my sister and I went to the UK and to Ireland and spent time there. And then she came home, and I stayed in Europe and went to Belgium and Amsterdam and Iceland on my own. And that had more nervousness of what's this going to be like? How's this going to go? But really, I think similarly to what we were touching on last time, one, it's amazing what happens when you just do something. It takes away as soon as you start to take away the question marks and see yourself, or I saw myself in the space, I realized, oh, this is fine. I can navigate this. In some ways, the thing missing is that person who later, when you're talking about it, can reminisce with you of, do you remember when we did this? We had this experience. So that's what you miss by not having someone with you. But in being solo, there's a lot of opportunity to just sort of go at your own rhythm, own pace of things. Whereas when you're with other people, you need to make sure you're trying to accommodate for everyone and make sure people are hopefully all having a good time getting into things that are important to them. And when you're solo, you can follow your own rhythm without as much of that, as well as one of the things I've really loved in traveling. Again, we were talking about me as introverted, so I can be quiet. And not that I'm not some of that traveling, but I come a little more out of that sort of, because I'm so fascinated by different cultures, by different people. And so to get to speak to people when, I really love food. And that's one thing I love in traveling, is to find restaurants to go to or other sort of interesting food experiences. And so I remember in Amsterdam, walking through the city. I love walking. And so walking through the city, walked fairly far and ended up at a food hall that they had there in Amsterdam, and I was surprised to find one of the stalls in there called itself barbecue. And I was thinking to myself, how is there barbecue in Amsterdam? But okay, I went over there, and I think maybe the guy had studied a little bit in the US and some other places. But he was talking to me we had some nice conversation, but he was also asking me, how'd you find this? This is really a place for locals. Tourists don't come here. And so it was just this nice experience to get to talk to him and get to learn a bit about his experience, a bit about how he sees his country. And I really love those sort of moments, those sort of experiences that you can have while traveling. And so solo, that's something that can happen for you, especially because at times some people may want to talk to you in some ways more because they see that you're on your own. And so they may they may want to talk to you more, and so you can get that opportunity with them. And so that's one experience that I've had. Another thing that I really love to do is to get to be part of guided tours in some way. If that's sometimes that's ended up being private, either I get lucky and it's private, or you pay for the private, or to be in a larger sort of group tour, which could be, 8, 10. So a small group, it could be larger than that. But I find in those, that's also a really wonderful time to meet other people and to not feel alone. So yes, I'm solo in terms of who I knew going into the experience. But then once the experience is happening, I can be interacting with some really fun people that you really laugh with and can get to know and hear about their travel experiences and what they've loved, and maybe get recommendations from them or the tour guides about things to do. And so that can also open up those possibilities. So I think that that's been another great thing of solo travel. And then I think it's really about what you were saying or touching on about not missing out on opportunities. And so sometimes because of people in my life, if it's not a good time for them to go, maybe financially, maybe because of what's happening at work or vacation situation, it can just, that's a time where I don't miss out on an experience to travel because it maybe doesn't work for other people to be able to go. And particularly in a world that can change really quickly, that can be really important. Like I know that I ended up going to Turkey maybe 2 years ago now at this point, and had a wonderful time. And that's somewhere I had wanted to visit for a while. And I think, Mediterranean cuisine is my favorite cuisine. And so Turkish sort of fits into that. I love Turkish food. So it was really fun to get to go to Turkey. But one of the reasons I wanted to go at the time that I did was I became concerned about their political situation. And they've been historically a democracy in that area, one of the few, I think, that has sort of Islam as a major religion that also identifies as a democracy. And that seemed really important. And it seems like a lot of that maybe is changing. And I became concerned just about what changes seem to be happening, and would it still be a similar experience to visit Turkey? Would it still be a welcoming place? And so I wanted to go before certain changes maybe take place that make it a place that would be hard to visit. And so I was really glad that I did, because there was a lot of amazing cultural experience to be had. And I did that solo, and to be had with meeting the people there and talking to them and getting their perspective on what was happening in the country, and really appreciating that. And then just really wonderful to get to visit some of the mosques. Just so gorgeous and beautiful, and to get to see that and see the architecture and the artistry, and to learn about Islam through the lives of the people, and how hopefully I didn't go in with too much stereotype because of the work we do, and I try to challenge that, but it still allows it to break down the stereotype, to hear from regular people who are worshiping, and to hear about the tenets they take and how much they take love and other things in the tenets that we don't necessarily always hear about, when the message can become very narrow about certain groups of people. And so I really appreciated that part of it. So I think those are a few of the things with solo travel. And I often think, I'm an introvert, so in that way it helps, because I'm also fine being on my own, walking around or doing things in a place, even a international sort of place. And I'm okay if there's less interaction. But I would think people who are even more gregarious than me and outgoing could have a really awesome time traveling solo, because I find that a lot of people in a lot of other countries are very welcoming. They really want to get to know you. They actually, one of the things that'll in some ways put us to shame is how much other people know about our country. They know things about that we have 50 states. And I could go somewhere and think, oh, this is all just one big country. I don't know any of their regions. I don't know that they have, I went to Mexico, and I remember the guide said something about they have states. And I was thinking, what? You mean this is just one big country that's just called Mexico? And so very, we're very ignorant. We can be. I know I am very ignorant oftentimes about other countries. And so
Yes.
that's fascinating to talk to them about how much they know about the US, how many people would like to visit the US and other places. But I found a lot of the world to be very welcoming, very interested in hearing about me, and that also makes it feel more inviting in traveling solo. Um,
Yeah. I guess I'm thinking, thank you so much for sharing those perspectives because, we work and we enjoy working with the emerging adult population. And I think this is a critical time, again, post COVID when it's safe. But I think this is a really important time for people to consider doing solo travel because, I think there's a lot to be gained from learning that you can enjoy time by yourself, that you can go and I, again, I can appreciate what you're saying about it can be hard when you're thinking back retrospectively about an experience and somebody else to kind of mark that experience with you. But I think there's something really empowering about going, navigating a new place by yourself, being able to exchange money, learn some way to communicate, getting around, all of those things that as emerging adults in particular, it's just important to know that you can do it. And so I think that's why I think study abroad is a great opportunity when we'll have those opportunities again in the future here at Carolina. But even, thinking about spring breaks or breaks and hearing from students who go and travel and of course be safe. We never want you to do things, unsafely. So research where you're staying and those kind of things. But I agree with so much of what you're saying because I think particularly for this age group, this is when you are challenging values and learning that, your way of thinking and seeing the world is not the only way. And what a better experience than to come face to face with people who think differently and who have different customs and values and still have wonderful lives and have joy and have, all the thing. Because I think, and thinking of my own experiences, I sort of, like you were saying, ignorantly thought like, we're just the best country ever and everybody wants to be like us and everybody wants to adopt all our traditions and norms. And while that may be the case in certain pockets, by and large, you learn that people have very rich histories that they want to preserve and that they're proud of, and they expect you to observe them as well. And there's some respect if you even try to understand. So I do think travel and solo travel in particular is just, there's something about feeling that accomplishment of, yes, whether it's wandering into a food hall that's off the beaten path and who else would find this, or, navigating a very complex transportation system that you've not done before. I think it's important for people to have those experiences at least once in their life to prove that they can do it. And then, whether you choose to later on in life is completely different. But I think for those of you who are thinking about traveling or who have the desire to go but are waiting for friends or family members, if you can go, here are two people who are big proponents of you safely traveling solo, just for the experience that it will provide.
And there's also something important about ways we can step out of what's familiar or what's our comfort zone.
Yes.
One of the things that I hear a ton, I'm sure you do as well, when working with students in therapy is when we're talking about change and doing something new is, oh, I don't know that I want to do that. I might be uncomfortable. And I often look at them with one of my, especially if we've been working together a while and we have a good relationship, they know I can get a little snarky. But I can look at them and be like, huh, like, why are we not doing something because of uncomfortable? Why is that just something to say, I'm not going to do this thing that could be really helpful for me just because of an internal sense of discomfort? And then we end up talking about, a lot of times we're uncomfortable with just things that are new, things that are unfamiliar, but that doesn't mean not to do them. And so I think that there's an important life lesson in that as well, of just what it can mean to teach ourselves to step into things that are unfamiliar and to step into discomfort, because that's where a lot of people can get stuck in their lives, is that getting stuck on, even if what's happening right now isn't good, or is painful, and I could change, it's sort of, if that's a little more unknown, or even if I think this could work out, since I don't have 100% guarantee, well,
Mhm.
that'll be uncomfortable, so I'm just gonna not do that, or I'm gonna, and that's been one of the things that I've learned over time in doing this profession that I don't know that I would have known, is how big a draw that can be for us, how strong that can be, that even you could be sitting with someone who's telling you, I've been dealing with this depression for this amount of years, and it's robbed me of this joy, and it's impacted relationships in these negative ways, and it's had all, and you hear all of these negative things,
Yeah.
but it's also been in some ways a constant companion. It's been
Mhm.
familiar, and they at least know, even if it sucks, how to navigate that suckiness. Whereas the new thing that we're discussing, that we're working on, even if it presents all its possibilities, there's something about that that's scary, that's uncomfortable, and people then may really struggle to move towards that. So I think at times when we can push ourselves um, out of our comfort zone, out of the familiar, a lot of wonderful things can present themselves, things we may not have even been expecting. And again, I think we mentioned this before, but the hilarity of it is we're doing this podcast largely because you got me out of my comfort zone in terms of, you asked me, would you like to do a podcast for my friend? And my first reaction to a lot of questions like that are no, internally. Um, but then I thought about it and said, okay, what are you really nervous about? Let's just do this. It'll be fun. And it ended up being this great experience that led into an idea to do this and hopefully be able to contribute something through this to get out things about CAPS and our wonderful colleagues and mental health and things
Mhm.
that we really care about and we hope will help students and will help people at UNC. And so you just never know when you get out of what's comfortable and familiar. And that's one thing that I take from travel in particular, can take from solo travel.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for doing the podcast. We had such a great time, and yeah, not knowing that that actually planted the seeds of what we're doing now. And so that, I think, is a wonderful message as well. Like sometimes it's just taking that first step, right? And everything may not end with a big, different change that you're doing kind of constantly like we are taking this on, but that you won't know if you don't take that first step. And I think that, a lot of times we see in our offices students who, there's a life that they want to be living, that they're imagining, that they want to be doing different things. And part of our job is to help them and empower them to take those early steps. Because by and large, and we've talked about this before, once you start doing something, those fears and all the ways that in your head you've worked it up to be this just worst case scenario, oftentimes start to fade when the reality of it is, yes, there are moments where it's uncomfortable or there are moments where it's scary, but if you can push through those, you can have really lovely experiences on the other side. And so I think those, part of what really invigorates me for the work we do are the life lessons, right? That we're working with people who are young adults who are for the first time challenging things that they had held true maybe their whole lives, and our job is to walk alongside them and challenge them gently and with love, but to help them see, okay, here's the life you're telling me you are imagining that you want for yourself. This is your values, these are the things you want to be doing, but here you are at this point A. How can we get you to point B? And sometimes it's not just taking that huge leap to now I'm doing all these things that I never did. It's usually starts with a step. And so, I think, again, linking it back to solo travel, I think one of the things that I've learned about myself is I am capable. I would always say I'm a person who's bad with directions. I would label myself that. But that's not entirely accurate, because I have navigated Tokyo's transit system alone, um, and got to my hotel and back fine several times over. So I think that there are ways that, and I feel so proud of those moments because I never thought I could do it. And so there are ways that I think, whether it's solo traveling or whether it's just really, like you said, pushing through the discomfort and recognizing that what's comfortable, you can't grow there, right? It's yes, it's like an old warm familiar blanket, but you don't get growth in those moments. It's pushing through those. It's giving yourself those positive self-talk that we talk about in our practice. And whatever the modality, whether it's CBT or you and I really, I know you more than I, but both of us really pull from interpersonal. But it's really, how are you talking to yourself about this situation? What's that internal dialogue? Are you already telling yourself that you're going to go get lost, or that you're not going to be able to speak the language and therefore won't be able to eat? And so you've already imagined this worst case scenario where you're just stranded somewhere, when in reality, you can do it, right? There, not only are there tools and techniques and apps now for that, there's an app for everything, but like you were saying, most people are really invested in, especially in high tourist places, in helping and getting you connected. And so I do think that there's something to be said. I really love this age population, because these are the lessons we get to see play out in our office. And that self-determination and that encouragement and empowerment and I did it, it's really, really, really wonderful. So I appreciate you sharing your solo travels. Where are you off to next when COVID lifts and we can do our travel? What's on your travel bucket list?
I don't know. I think well, I do know. Every everywhere is on the list, especially if I haven't been there before. I think at this point, I've been fortunate. I think I've now visited 6 of the 7 continents, and so going to Antarctica would be really great to get to say I've been to all 7 continents, as well as, like, I think it would be a really beautiful place to visit, and the nature aspect of it, where you can kind of see penguins and other things in nature would be really interesting to me. So that's one thing that I've been thinking about. And then you've spoken about your love of Japan, and so that's fairly high on the list to go there. I think there would be a lot of beautiful culture that I'd be very interested in, and I've already been researching a little bit of what it could be to go there. And then I'd also be fascinated about the food.
Food.
People that I know have talked about how wonderful the food is, and a lot of chefs on TV have really kind of, Japan is one of their favorite, if not their favorite, places to visit for food. And so that would be a thing that I'd be really interested in. And so maybe in the future doing something with Japan and sort of some of the neighboring countries in Asia, if that were to be going to South Korea, if that were to be Taiwan, if that were to be sort of things in the area. So I think those are a few things that are next. But then there's also places within the United States that I would like to visit, to try and get to all 50 states, and getting closer to having gotten there with that. And so visiting, like, I'd really like to visit Yellowstone and to see kind of the natural beauty out there, and sort of out west is the area of the country I haven't been, and I think it would be fun. And my dad grew up on Westerns and loves that. And so I'd like to particularly go out there with him. And I think you can take some different Western themed kind of things that you can do, almost like be part of a wagon train, or
Oh, cool.
stuff like that I think he'd find really cool. And so yeah, there's always places to go. And then I would love to get back to Italy. Really love Italy. Have loved interacting with the Italian people. I think that the language is gorgeous. So would love to get back to, I think, Venice is my favorite place. And so would love to get back to Venice, would love to get to Sicily. I haven't been to Sicily yet, so would like to get back to Italy. So there's no shortage of places to go. The only things standing between me and that are COVID and vacation time, and then of course the big one is money. so we'll see what comes of that. But one thing I was also thinking about is, as you were talking, I think we talked last time about what draws us to being in college counseling center work. And as you were talking, it made it click in for me that another thing that draws me to working with this population and being in a counseling center environment is all of the possibilities that can exist in being in a college and a university with growth and experiences. And one of the things why I love the work that I do, or one of the things I hope for, is to be part of helping students maximize the best parts of what this experience can be. My undergrad experience was really great. It was better in a lot of ways than I would have thought it would be. Not that I had really negative ideas of what it would be, but it was more unknown. But it was really great, really special. I can remember one of the conflicts growing up with my mom and me was she would frequently want me to be more involved in things, in organizations or whatever the case may be. And I wanted to hang with friends, do my own thing. I didn't want to do as much of that. But that became a big part of my college experience of, I think as I got to school, I, over time, maybe each semester sort of added a new organization to be a part of, if that was NAACP or if that was my fraternity, Phi Sigma Pi, or whatever other organization. I worked at the Leadership Center. So eventually I added these different things and became a part of campus and got to do a lot of really interesting service sorts of things and educational kind of things, and just became amazed at just how many opportunities can exist in a college environment. And so that's often something in my work now that I hope for students, is that they can find a way to maximize the positives and some of the really great things that can be taken from this time, because a lot of this won't be as easily available when you leave school, to have maybe as diverse a grouping of people in one place that you could access and learn about and learn from, the education opportunities of different potential classes you could take, organizations you can get involved in, ways you could get involved in leadership within those organizations. And there's, just like you mentioned, study abroad. There's things that you could get exposed to that can become harder in other parts of life, either that you have to expend more energy to access them or to find them than you might in a university setting, where maybe those things are more easily listed out for you, or just that life happens, that typically people go and they get into longer term relationships, marriage, children, whatever the case may be, that life changes and some things maybe become harder to access just because of where you're at in your life. And so that's something I'm always hoping for with students. And I'm hoping in some ways the work that I do with them, or the interface that they have with CAPS, can help them to have a really positive UNC experience, is what I really hope for them and want from them, because of things you've been mentioning about what growth and change can happen and what people can get exposed to, and what it can mean to get to come into yourself and ask yourself, who do I want to be, and how you can really find that. And I really love getting to be part of that, but also hopefully helping people to clear out some of the noise or the barriers that might exist to that occurring for them. So that's another thing that's drawn me to this work. So that just clicked in as you were talking.
Yeah, no, I think that certainly resonates with all the reasons I love the work we do as well. And I was thinking about, for a lot of our listeners, this may be the first time that they've maybe spoken to a CAPS provider or thought about therapy. And so we do get people who've always wanted or knew that they sort of could benefit from therapy, but college really presents the first time that they're able to make choices about their own treatment and kind of unearthing things that they have maybe always been there, or that they're curious about. And so we do get students who have said, I've always wanted to try therapy, or I knew therapy could be really good, but maybe my family doesn't value it, or, particularly in Brown and Black communities, there's still stigma that exists. So I think that, a lot of time we're doing education as well about what the therapy process is and what it isn't. And we're also kind of, giving some examples of what are good or not good, what are appropriate kind of things to work on, because we do have a brief therapy model at CAPS. And so some maybe more longer term work, we may need to get you connected to someone in the community where you can do that kind of work. So I do think, for that reason and more, I love that this is sometimes our students' first opportunity to kind of take charge of their own treatment and mental health needs. And so I think that, part of what I get excited about is, that teaching component, that psycho ed piece. Maybe what we could do is walk through kind of a typical way that you could access services through CAPS for those who wouldn't know. And so we do have a triage model. And Anthony, I'm going to start, but please jump in if I'm leaving things out or if there's your explanation. But a student's first contact with us is through our triage. Now, because we're remote right now, that looks like a phone screen appointment. And so a student would call CAPS at the number listed and get connected and, be greeted by a CAPS front desk receptionist, and then be sent a link to fill out information. And the information that you fill out is very important because it gives us a sense of what's going on, how long it's been going on, how disruptive it is to your functioning, as well as questions about, social supports, questions about substance, questions about, past traumas, and all kinds of information. So you get a lot of information, and then you send that information back through the link. And then a CAPS provider will contact you. And that, for a lot of people, could be your first clinical contact with CAPS. So the purpose of that CAPS phone screen provider is to do sort of a quick and dirty assessment of what's going on and how we can best and appropriately serve you. So for many, many students, they are going to be able to be served through CAPS, whether that's in group therapy, brief therapy, medication management, and then for a smaller number of students, again, based on criteria such as, the intensity, duration of your symptoms, how long standing they've been, those students will be best served through our referral coordination services, where they can get connected to outside providers. So back to the CAPS phone screen appointment. During that time, the provider is going to ask a lot of questions, and they have that information that you've completed. And so you want to be thinking of, kind of what's going on and why now, what led you to contact CAPS. And then at the end of that appointment, you're going to be given what's called a disposition. And so your disposition could be to group therapy. It could be to individual brief therapy with a CAPS provider. It could be for medication management services. It could be for referral coordination services, which is a meeting with one of our referral coordinators who's going to work to help you get connected to the community and talk about any barriers to getting connected to a long-term provider. And so you will leave that phone screen appointment with a plan for the next step. So those are the ways that that's kind of how you can access CAPS services. If it's after hours, so that is Monday through Friday, 9 to noon, 1 to 4. That's how you connect with us if you need things. You can also call the CAPS number after hours, and we have what's called CAPS 24/7. And so these are providers, not your local providers, but these are mental health providers who are always available and will answer the call and can kind of walk you through whatever's going on, because we can't always plan for crises, right? So if it's 2 a.m. and you're really struggling and you really just need to talk to someone, that would be an appropriate time to call the 24-hour line, and they're going to talk to you, kind of triage what's going on, and then give you a plan probably to follow up with CAPS the next day. Anthony, let me check in. Are there things I'm forgetting? Because I'm doing this kind of on the fly, so I want to make sure we're hitting all the things.
Yeah, I think that you're mostly, hitting on the things. I think one thing that you didn't mention is that pretty much all services are free, that there can be a charge sometimes within, like if you need to meet with psychiatry around medication, but they can walk you through that, talk about insurance and affordability options. And we always want to work with students around affordability. So if that's a concern, never want people to assume that means they can't get some service. We really work hard around any of that. But services are free. So I think that's important to talk about, and you'll never get this high quality of mental health service again for this amount of cost. So you might want to take advantage of that. And so I think that's one thing I would mention about it being free. I think another thing is about just what it can mean to be able to contact CAPS and be seen right then. A number of other centers, counseling centers around the country, go off of a model of trying to schedule some of that first contact and appointment. And while that can work for them, there also can be some delays in some of when people are seen. And so I found that this sort of model that we have of being able to have someone talk to a counselor really immediately after they do the paperwork can be a really wonderful thing. And so I would want students to know about that piece of things, for sure, to be aware of that. So I think that's some of the piece, as well as I just think that it can leave people somewhat nervous to think about seeking out help and assistance for a variety of reasons. Messages they may have been given, sometimes those messages can be connected to things that are related to culture and race, that can be related to just family, that maybe says we do it all by ourselves and we don't talk about family stuff outside of the family, we don't ask for help. Particularly, I've historically done like a men's group and worked with men. So men get a lot of messages about that being a real man is about going it alone and not showing any other emotions besides maybe anger, that you're in any way hurting or struggling. And so it's unpacking some of those sort of messages. So I know there can be a variety of things that can keep people from coming in, and though want people to also just understand that while there is some paperwork, you're still gonna get to talk to a person, and they're really working hard to understand your situation, to provide support and provide really think about what could be some best avenues to really assist you in healing and growth. And one of those you mentioned was about that for a smaller subset of students, we may look to work with them to refer them to somewhere in the community outside of CAPS for more open-ended or longer-term individual work. And I know a lot of students can have reaction to that. And the reason that that's done is not to say, this is too big for us to handle, or you can't be helped, or any of that sometimes people can hear, especially when they're in distress. But the real reason that that's done is, one, we understand very much what it can mean to build trust and a relationship with a therapist that works really well. And so to start with, so it's better if you can start with someone from the beginning and take time to build that relationship and take time to get out your story, get to be known and heard, versus maybe to meet with someone briefly and then have to switch to a therapist, tell a lot of the story again, get into other things. It can be hard to keep doing that work around, if it's vulnerability, if it's opening up, if it's just telling the story again. And so we find that oftentimes it's better to get connected sooner, because we know how that can take time. And particularly for some, either people because of somehow they might be as individuals, or because of some of the things they may have experienced, building that relationship may be a process that takes much more time. And so it's good to have that time versus to feel any sense of needing to rush with that process. And so that's a big reason. And so whenever that conversation comes up about referral, that is really from a standpoint to best serve you, to best serve a student in that process. So that's one of the things. And then I think another thing is just that I think that our director and his contacts with upper level administration within UNC has garnered at times more positions or at times resources for CAPS that can help us better serve students. But like pretty much most counseling centers around the country, the students vastly outnumber the staff at a counseling center. And so there's also just a reality of being able to do the best service possible to the most students with a staff that is not able to equal
see everybody,
student numbers and see everybody. And so you also have to think about that in terms of how do we best serve people. So that's why we do that. Those are a few of the reasons around the referral process. But again, as we have this conversation, one of the things we were talking about, stepping out of comfort, Aaron was talking about how we can get into sort of negative self-talk and it just stops us from even doing anything. And so we end up living in like a fantasy. We end up living in assumption of, oh, this is how it'll be, so I'm not going to even try it out. And we hear from students all the time who come in of, oh, this wasn't as bad as I thought it would be, and this wasn't what I thought it would be. And so that's something I also hope people would take away as they listen to us, see us on this, is that idea too as well of you may have these ideas, but come check it out and see what it can be. And I think you'll find, because I've seen it happen so much, that if you're imagining some horrific thing, it won't be that. And like most of life, when we imagine that, it
Yes.
turns out to be just fine, and it's often a non-event. And that's also a way to see it for yourself of what can this be, and what's
Mm-hmm.
this gonna look like, and what's even possible. And it's interesting how much that can mean to people. I've been doing this now. I think if I include graduate school, 20 years at this point. So good Lord, I'm getting old. But and I feel that every day. But one of the things that gives me, I think, is that I've gotten to see now things over time. And clearly a thing that I've seen is that people frequently comment on, this was not what I imagined, this is much better than I imagined. And even what people comment often on is that there is something often for people really powerful about just the act of seeking out help. And so
Mm-hmm.
that shifts something for people. It can change a lot of things for them just in saying, I need help. I want things to change in my life. And here I am,
Yes.
pushing through maybe whatever discomfort and anxiety I have about this, whatever stigmas or messages are rattling around for me. In the act of saying, I want help, I want to change, a lot of positive things have come from people. And it's amazing what sort of really motivated people are able to change and do with their lives in a very short amount of time often. And
Yeah.
so in coming in, that can set up a process where maybe they end up needing 2-3 sessions and they're good to go. And I've gotten to see that a lot. And so I would just want to encourage students to check it out. Much
Yeah.
like we talked about with travel, what it can mean to just step into discomfort and see, and how you can see you're more capable than you thought, or see things aren't what you imagined. I think the same is true of seeking out help, seeking out mental health treatment, coming to CAPS is similar.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I feel so inspired, and I hope y'all do too. And one of the things we like to do is end on a note called Just Stop It. And I was thinking, as you were talking, I couldn't help but think that's such a great thing for us to really leave our listeners with today is, the idea that comfort, so much of what we talked about today is moving beyond discomfort and kind of getting out. You've heard that term, I'm in my head, right? I'm stuck in my head, but so much can happen when you can just take that first step. And again, for you accessing services at CAPS, that first step would be to contact CAPS through you could call online. I'm sorry, you could call the number listed, and that's going to take the first step to figuring out if treatment through CAPS is appropriate, or getting you connected for all the reasons Anthony mentioned. But I think, I want us to spend these next few minutes just really encouraging our listeners to just stop thinking that they're the only ones, right, that stay stuck in their head and that are sort of afraid to get out of their comfort zone. And whether that's to get connected with treatment or to solo travel or any of the things we've listed today, I think it is an important message to hear. You're not the only ones. That we, even as mental health professionals, have had to have moments of checking ourselves and challenging ourselves that, like, no, you got this, you can do this. Like you mentioned, your first reaction to even doing a podcast was like, I don't want to do that. But upon reflection, you were able to say, okay, what is it that's really? And so I really think that's important for us to kind of encourage people to think about. You're not the only one. It happens to us too. The difference is we recognize it and we challenge it. We don't stay stuck there. Even if you had said no and meant no and didn't change your mind, that would have been fine. But I really like
You wouldn't have taken a no.
I would have tell the truth. I would have kept on about it. But, I think it is important that you talked about that process. If you were saying, I really thought, what is it that I'm afraid of? Or what is it that I think is going to happen and what's keeping and holding me back? So yeah, any words of encouragement as we think about this issue of just stop it, and kind of how people can move from being in their head about something, or their initial reaction being no, and then maybe starting that process of thinking about what is it that you're actually afraid of and how can you challenge that.
Yeah, I think one thing I would say to that, you were saying you're not the only one. So I would comment on that in many ways as we talk about seeking help coming into CAPS, is that one of the barriers is that, and we hear this all the time, many students are thinking to themselves, I'm the only person struggling. I look around at Carolina, everyone seems like they're doing their work really easily, that they're getting good grades really easily. Everyone seems like they're happy, everyone. And particularly when you get into social media and how much that's curated to show all the best of something, people can get into this idea of I'm the only one, and that can stop them, because with that comes a real sense of shame about being so damaged, so broken, so abnormal, so different from everyone else, so weak because
Mm,
of experiencing what you're experiencing, this idea that I'm the only one. And I really talk a lot with students about to debunk that. That's one of the reasons I love group therapy, because group therapy very clearly and quickly debunks that. And that's probably one of the number one statement we hear in group therapy, or that I hear from group therapy, is people saying, you know what, I realized through this, I'm not alone. And I was able to see that I could relate to a lot of people here. We're going through some similar things. And that's a lesson I would hope that people would take, particularly if that's stopping you at all from seeking out help, is that you're not alone. You're not the only one to experience something. That's why so many books have been written about things. And also, what I like to talk to people about is, if you were the only one, then I wouldn't have a job. CAPS wouldn't have the staff that it does. If somehow out of a school of 20 something, 30,000 students, there was only one student that's struggling and having any kind of challenge.
we
And
couldn't
so
do
there's a lot of people struggling. There's a lot of people in challenges. And it is, I think, a real sign, given how much fear it can produce in people. I think that very clearly, in order to call many times ourselves strong, that has to be in response to something that's hard or something that we're afraid of. And so there's no way then that this many people can be afraid of seeking help for it not to be a sign of strength to do so. So
it.
seeking help is a sign of strength. And I would hope that people realize, if we're ending our segment about just stop it, just stop it. Stop believing you're the only one going through a difficult thing or struggling, because there are many people, many students struggling. And what you will find if you're able to seek out help is that you are not alone. And that's one reason we call this podcast Feeling Seen, because that's what people talk about is so powerful for them when they seek out help, when they connect in group therapy, and when they connect more in their lives and people get to see more of them, is what it means to feel seen, how healing that is, and how much that helps people to reduce shame, which is the sense that I am bad, and how much that is able to reduce that feeling. And so that's what I would hope people leave this podcast with, is just stop it. You're not alone. And you're
Awesome.
not the only one.
Awesome. Well, thank you all today for listening. We hope you feel seen. And we're just excited to keep bringing you content. Again, as always, if you have things that you want to hear our expert opinion on, please let us know. And we will continue to bring you content as much as we can. Take care of yourself. And again, we hope you feel seen.
Bye.